So I have to hit broadcast though, right? Good morning and welcome to Thursday morning of our Heritage Ohio virtual conference. This morning we get to hear from Velan Brown. Our sponsor for this morning is actually out sick, so I won't be introducing Dave Williams from Cross Street Partners, but we always want to give a big shout out and a thank you to our sponsors for these events, in person and virtual alike. We'd just like to welcome you. Please type any questions into the question and answer portion at the bottom of your screen. You can also feel free to use the chat box if you'd like. We'll watch both of those, and I'm going to take questions throughout the session. And so if you have questions, then feel free to type those, and we're looking forward to hearing all the amazing stuff that Velan Brown has for us this morning. So I'm going to turn it over to Velan to give you a little introduction. She and I just met actually like a month or so ago. I've been looking for an expert in this inclusivity problem that we have around board tables, and I think we might have found her. So I'm really excited to hear from Velan this morning, and I hope that all of you will enjoy hearing from her as well. Remember that all of our sessions will be recorded, and you'll get the PowerPoint presentations, so there's no need to furiously try to take a million notes through our sessions. You'll get recordings and documents following the session. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Velan. Thanks for being here, Velan.
Thank you. Such an honor. Yes, again, my name is Velan Brown, and I'm coming to you today with about 25 years of experience in nonprofit, what I would call our most marginalized communities and spaces. That's also been my personal journey, and we'll talk a little bit more about that. But I think the core of what I bring to this work and to this conversation is a deep understanding of what it does mean to be excluded, number one, and what the opportunities and just amazing things we can accomplish when we invite others in, when there is an opportunity to center those marginalized narratives, when we begin to empower and resource and connect in ways that our humanity are longing for. And so that's kind of my call to everyone, is that we all know what it means to want to be a part of a community, a part of an organization. And there are things that we don't understand, and don't understand how we're pushing people out, just in our aesthetics, just in the ways that we communicate, that often are a barrier. So we're going to talk a lot about that this morning. But more than anything, I just want to bring myself. Part of me having this training is also for me to model what inclusion means. So I want to invite you into my office space. If we were in my home, I'd invite you into my living room with a cup of coffee and probably a piece of sweet potato pie. And we would just have a conversation. So we're gonna connect. I hope that you find this workshop helpful. And I'm just going to be myself through all of this too. So come along. So there are a few objectives that I'm hoping that we can investigate or open up or explore together. And they are: explore what is needed to develop and nurture an inclusive culture. And again, oftentimes, because we come from our own culture, we are biased. We don't understand how to be different. Sometimes we're comfortable, and we need to learn how to stretch across the table or stretch across our own comfort zones. And again, there's so much beauty and opportunity when we do that. And also, again, unpacking implicit bias and erasure culture. I think we are all right now witnessing what has happened to our country, because for so long we've tried to push down our own racial history and the impact of that in so many ways. And so there's deep consequences from when we don't offer a space in our society, in our workspaces, for everyone. And then I want this to be a challenge too, for us to be ourselves, challenge ourselves to be and be in community. So we're going to explore a little bit of that. But before we do, again, I wanted to tell a little bit about my story. So These are my beautiful grandparents, Joe Frazier and Cecil Frazier. My grandmother just celebrated her 100th birthday, where even through social distancing, we were able to do this 100 car parade by her nursing home and just offer her 100 roses. But Grandma and Granddaddy came to Portland, Oregon, one of the most racist and historically exclusive states. But they came here because there was a hope and a promise for a better future. And that was through the World War II ships. And so Granddaddy saw a flyer that promised work and opportunity to raise his family. And during that time, he and grandmother had been experiencing what we now know as Jim Crow laws, and it was very difficult for him to, provide for his family. So Granddaddy hopped on a train, came to Portland with his brother, and within a couple months was able to send back a check to the family and say, this is a real thing. And so this other picture on the side here is what we would have every Friday. We'd have Fraser family fish fries. And my grandmother and her sister married brothers. So my grandfather and his brother married sisters. And so even though I was in one of the whitest cities in the country, I didn't know that because I was in this beautiful Black bubble, which now we call affinity space, right? And so I was able to um, kind of from the spoon, digest all of the ways of being, our customs, our traditions, in a normal space because at school, at church, everything resembled where I was from and the people that I came from. And so here's a few more pictures of what it was like for me growing up in this area. Um, Here's a picture of my grandparents, my larger family. And here's a picture of my immediate family. So I was sharing earlier, I'm a grandmother and proud of that. So I have to get my grandbaby in here just a little bit. Um, but even with this beautiful, rich foundation and a thriving community, which was Northeast Portland, waves of gentrification began to impact that huge nucleus of a family that I just showed you a picture of. And it was so difficult for us to navigate wanting to be having resources, having businesses, having properties. We just began to kind of get chipped away. And we went to the state, we petitioned, we did all the right things. And yet, because of systemic racism and because of the ways in which um, the city was structuring the new renovation and who got to be in and who got to be out, even if we did all the right things, we were unfortunately forced out. And so this next picture is, hold on just a second. This was the last day before we moved out of Portland. And, the cost of living, taxes, it just, began to be like, you're not wanted here. And again, this was our home. My grandfather had built ships. He brought families here. He recruited families here. And it was really difficult for my children to understand, Mommy, I hear people say we live in a diverse world. I hear that people want us to be a part of, their gatherings. They want our representation. But do they really want us? Because we continue to get pushed out. And so we were able to be a part of my family was able to be a part of a documentary and where we began to really show the generational impact of what erasure and what gentrification was doing to our very vibrant community. And I just want to show you a clip of this because unfortunately, Portland, Oregon was the case study model of how to do gentrification right. So much so, if you all might be familiar with United Shades of America, Kamau Bell came and interviewed my dad and I in our community to talk about what is happening in this city. And so it's a wave that you probably also are experiencing, and have wondered like how quickly how did things change so quickly. So I want to show you a little bit about of this clip here. So give me a moment. This is where I'm going to get a little nervous as I kind of float out and float back in. Let me know if you can hear everything too when I start this, please. Let's see. I'm going to make sure I'm sharing the sound. Yep. And let me know if you can see this. Oh, I may have to stop sharing this to share the video.
I'm
Can you?
seeing I'm seeing it, Velan.
You are? Oh, awesome. Okay. Yay. Okay. So here's a little bit right here.
Holding on to what's left of this community's history, trying to understand how our neighborhood has changed so drastically. I remember Black women sitting on porches of Vancouver and Mississippi Street where they demanded, oh, don't you pass by before you give a formal greeting. Trying to escape the noise of hipsters, beer parties, and bike traffic. Keeping my cool when they say I'm being way, way too dramatic. But I lift my voice and I say we had no choice. Where floods, condos, and boulders continue to smolder, meet us, their roots. What can I do with our family tree that continues to be uprooted underneath me? One they keep replanting again and again and again. Help me to understand, how are we supposed to stand up and fight? For me and my generation and the next one to come, when they keep erasing our presence and blocking the sun of our view, of me and you, we will resurrect hope and cement our faith. We will choose to remember what no one can take. We will rebuild, rebuild, rebuild again, because our seeds and our bloodline refuse to die. We will walk with our heads held high.
I'm going to pause just a little bit here. So this is a layering of story. There's a whole, my son was on a basketball team, and it's also the story of gentrification. So I can send the trailer to you all later to see the whole 20 minutes, but I'm going to fast forward a little bit to get to more of our conversation here. So just
rivals. Number 1, Jefferson. Number 2, Grant. Seems like in the communities of
3 or 4 rows, found his dad. 3 or 4 rows, found his dad, and we just sat there and we said some stuff, and he went back there.
She's exploding. She's gonna rip it away every time.
Every time.
Touch her shoulder.
Oh.
Not today.
Okay.
That's my grandbaby again.
All right.
Thank you for this food we're about to receive for the nourishment of our bodies. May be edified and to continue to do your will. In Christ's name we pray. Amen.
Amen.
2018 in November, I get a text from our landlord that he's selling the building, selling our townhome. Sorry, but you got 3 months to find a place to live. And it's in the middle of the year. It's in the middle of basketball season. So the timing was horrible to uproot a family in the middle of the school year. I asked him, can you give us a little bit more time? Can you wait to the summer? Like, is the building sold? He told me that the building was sold. I found out later the building is not sold. So that wasn't cool.
Portland, Oregon is known as a hub of liberal and progressive thought. It's also one of the most gentrified cities in the country.
Today, just 6% of all Portland residents are black, and the average home price in North and Northeast Portland is more than $500,000.
And then you look at what it costs to buy a home in Portland, it's a joke. Like $1 million for a 3-bedroom house who can afford that? Not us.
Come on, let's get in your car seat. I don't have time to argue with you.
I mean, Portland's still a beautiful place. It's still a beautiful city. It's just the color of the neighborhood changed. You know what I mean? The dynamics of the neighborhood changed. The prices of the houses unchanged. I mean, I probably started noticing this probably 15, 16 years ago.
That change traces back to the displacement of thousands of African American families from North and Northeast Portland since the 1960s, forced out by waves of city development and gentrification. Fast forward, and the neighborhood that was 68% black in 1990 was just 28% black by 2010.
So I'm just out walking around and I'm looking, I'm like, yo, man, this don't feel the same. This starting to look a little different. People walking dogs around here now, and people laying out in front of their yard tanning. I'm like, oh, the neighborhood unchanged.
Found a new study released by Governing magazine that says Portland is gentrifying faster than any other city in the country. Money, development, and wealthier people moving into once downtrodden neighborhoods. Those who have long lived there, priced out.
I mean, this community used to be really, really tight-knit in the sense that everybody lived in this neighborhood, you know what I mean? And so now that's changing. The faces of the community is changing. The dynamics are changing. So
when I got here in 1963, there was almost 100 African American businesses. Today, I could take you around, I could show you 5. The people are gone, the businesses are gone.
As you look at a neighborhood to where it no longer belongs to the black community. It's no longer the black community. They've been dispersed to Southeast Portland and Vancouver or wherever else they live.
You started seeing different spots opening, because I mean, Alberta, Killingsworth, Mississippi, Unthank, them type of places. When we was growing up, after dark, man, if you didn't live in the neighborhood, you didn't see people that weren't same similar skin color, you know what I mean? Like Alberta Street, like what? No, let's use the cops, you know what I mean? People wasn't coming over there.
Gentrification, it sucks. It's like, we want nice restaurants and yoga studios or nice things around, but like at the detriment to who? And like, I think that's one thing that's kind of got lost. There's so much that has gone away from what used to be like proud African-American families like in the area. Again, they're gonna hang on to like something that is still like a proud, predominantly African-American thing in the community. That's Jefferson basketball, that's Grant basketball.
The simple truth is, man, there's a lot of heart in that neighborhood, and it's the one thing that hasn't changed, and I think that's comforting for a lot of people.
Okay, I'll stop here. Yeah, there's so much I can unpack there, but I shared that because, to be honest, I was enjoying, the salt and straw ice creams and the beer pubs and, it wasn't that we did not feel like we had to keep the city or our neighborhood for ourselves. We wanted to do it together, right? How powerful maybe that it could have been if there was an opportunity for, new members of community, because community means a lot of things, right? It's a place, it's a space where we do the same things, or we're proud about where we're from. And so I think, like the gentleman that last spoke, there was something that got left out. And that is what I mean about to be community and to be in community. Like there's a sense of responsibility for us to honor who's been there before And what do we do to make sure that there's a space and a place for them to still thrive alongside and beside with us? And I think that's my work. I've done a lot of therapy, a lot of self-reflection, a lot of work to let go of the harm and the bitterness and the hurt of having to leave a space where I saw generations of families and community members. Still gets me emotional. But I had to do a lot of work to let go of what happened and decide to focus on what I could do to still have a place to go to still understand and build community and belonging into my children, into my grandchildren. And I'm grateful that there's these kind of sage ways of being and ways of preserving culture. And part of that has been to say, no matter what space I'm in, just with this conference, with us right now, I said, I want to be myself. I said, I want to invite you into my living room. I promised myself that if I can't change the places that I go, I can be who I am in those spaces that I go. And so I'd like for you to take a moment. I have a self-reflection question for you to consider. And, when you think about community, what does that mean to you? When you think about, if there's any reflections you have on your own sense of belonging and what space and place has meant to you, what comes up for you? What does that mean for you? So if you can throw this up in the chat if you'd like to kind of do it as we go, or I honor the introverts too of the world, and you can, if you have a pen and you want to just jot your thoughts down too, that's fine. So let's just take a few minutes to think about, what does community mean to you? I want to be able to pull up my chat here. Let's see. Francis, you'll let me know if there's some good stuff happening in the chat.
I will.
Okay, 'cause I'm afraid to mess up my screens here.
No, I'll just read off a couple of them. Obligation.
Yeah.
Community is the collective grouping around me, people and places that have and hold meaning. Knowing the people around you at work, at play. Familiarity. Harmony through working together.
Yes.
Community is my tribe. People I connect with emotionally and have similar interests and values. Where all are welcome to just be. Supporting one another, standing up for those who cannot stand up for themselves, being a family.
Oh, I love that, yes.
Togetherness and harmony, a sense of belonging, and the knowledge that there are no throwaway communities.
That's powerful. Thank you. Yes. I'm connecting with all parts of that definition, and I think all the definitions, and I think one of the parts of the story that I didn't share with you all that I wanted to let you know about my grandfather. So after the Vanport flood happened, we were displaced. I wasn't even born yet, but the family was displaced. And because of the things that you all just described about community, I'm gonna finish this. Let's see, I have some definitions too. My grandfather's Jewish boss, because they had built a sense of connection and a place of obligation, he offered my grandfather to stay with him when there was no room. And most of the families that my grandfather actually recruited from the South had to go back because there was no place to stay. The Red Cross was over flooded. Again, during that time, it was still on the books that to be Black and to live in Oregon was illegal. There was exclusionary laws that were still on the books. And so not only did my grandfather's boss take him in, he also took out a loan in his own name to buy our family home. And so Granddaddy would pay him under the table. And he always said, "You're as true as your word. You're only as true as your word." And it was because of this he did not have the same color skin as my grandfather, but he respected him as a human being, as someone that had the same needs and wants and desires that he had. And we sold that home just last year for $1 million. Was able to put my grandmother up in a beautiful space. There's scholarship money that's been sent out to the grandchildren that my own son is benefiting from right now. And so inclusion and community and connection also allow us to cover each other, also allow us to share our resources. And I don't know about y'all, but this pandemic in particular has really, it's called us home. It's called us to think about who's next door to us. It's called us to go beyond, our normal patterns of space and place and community and be on screens and Zoom calls and we can have this opportunity to reach out across our norms. And so community is so powerful. And so the first little grouping of a definition I have is a group of people living in the same place or having a particular characteristic in common. So y'all are from Ohio, I'm from Portland, Oregon. So, we have these spaces that are geographic, right? That we saw in the video can be marked by you're in, you're out, or this is for this group and this is not, right? But then there's this community that I'm hearing we're talking about too, is a feeling of fellowship with others as a result of a sharing of common attitudes, interests, and goals. And y'all, that's what we can still do. I can't go back. I wish I could, but I can't go back and get the community where I'm from. It's not there. The people are gone. Many have chosen to leave because no one else is around. And so most of us, unfortunately, are gone. But there's a way of being and there's ways of calling in community that I want all of us to take responsibility for those that have been pushed out and that have felt abandoned by being who they are. And so another little, moment here, what is inclusion? So talked about, we're going to be creating this inclusive community engagement or this inclusive ways of being. Can we do that again and kind of put up some ideas and share what comes to mind? Don't Google the definition, but like what just comes up for you when you think about inclusion? And Francis, can you share some of those again as they pop up?
I will do that. Feel free to type those into the chat box. Sharon says, welcome to all. Ashley says, intention.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Open door to all.
Yes.
Representation.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Where all are welcome to just be. Yes. Everybody's a part of the greater good, a pathway for everyone to engage. Intentionally seeking out voices of those who don't look, think, or live like you.
Yes.
Understanding and being heard. Policy, planning, and accountability.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. These are good. These are good. I have just a working definition I've been working with too, and it is this involvement and empowerment where inherent worth and dignity of all people are recognized. It's this way of being, this environment that promotes and sustains a sense of belonging. It values and practices respect for the talents, beliefs, backgrounds, and ways of living of its members, right? I'm trying to be a gardener, y'all, but I haven't had much success. But I just appreciate gardens, and I appreciate the individuality of each plant and the purpose and the things that it can do with it. But all of it is contained in my little garden box. Those that have made it and those that haven't, unfortunately. But there's this way, somewhere along the line, we were sold this lie that to be alone and to be by yourself and to be individualistic is the way to success, is the way to be better. And the truth is, I don't want to just eat, romaine lettuce in my garden, although I love romaine lettuce, but I want kale, I want butter lettuce, I want spinach, right? I want arugula, right? They're all greens, but they're all unique and special and needed in my salad. And then when I think about inclusion, there's so much we're missing out on because of the ways in which we have been boxed out from one another. And again, y'all, I think this is a beautiful moment in history and in time where we can change that narrative. I love this quote by Audre Lorde, and hold on just a second. It says, it's not our differences that divide us, it's our inability to recognize, accept, and celebrate those differences. And so we gotta build some muscle around this, right? Again, especially around our individualistic culture, especially around our comfort levels, because there is something for you, for us, for me to all benefit from when we are sharing and when we are being in this way. So I just have a few more slides. I'm gonna, these are some things that I've been practicing in my engagement. Again, I shared that I have worked with nonprofits, for-profits, from the Trailblazers to the food bank, and really helping folks realize that transformation in inclusion can happen where they're from. And it first starts with us. It first starts with us. And so here are a few ways. I'm not a, prescriptive person in terms of how I believe human experiences happen. I'm more of an emergent strategist. I'm more of one who believes we each have something to bring to the table. So these are some of the things. It's not exclusive at all. I was telling Francis, there's so much I could share, but these are the ones that I feel have been very successful in taking folks a step deeper into this practice, into this way of being. And so I know we've heard about, personal bias. We're having more conversations around cultural bias as, again, the political landscape continues to make us have this conversation. And there is something powerful about learning how to be self-reflective, learning how to pause and think about, why am I thinking this way? Why am I having this response to this person or to this person's way of being in such a way that's making me feel defended or resisted? Oftentimes there's biases, there's all these schemas of what we've just been spoon-fed through media, through sound bites, through history books, unfortunately, that make us think differently about really who we are. And we all know, or I'm assuming we all know, that race is a social construct. It's not even real, right? But it's the ways in which privilege and resourcing and advancement has been given to one group and not the other. And so, or a way of beauty or a way of acceptance, right? And so we have these biases based on our prejudices that often comes from our cultural backgrounds. Even as a Black woman, I have cultural biases. I prefer fried chicken over baked chicken. I really do. But I need to eat baked chicken. I can't eat fried chicken all the time. No, but seriously, I too have ways of being that make me comfortable and are easier for me to navigate and manage. And so I'm reaching across the table too in my own social groups. I'm tapping back more to my Indigenous heritage. I'm tapping back into my Asian and Latina friends, right? It's one thing to be supported as a minority, as a woman of color. And I think there's something so, I was gonna say badass, I hope that's okay, but there's something so powerful of being able to extend that invitation to other people like me that are in the same battle, but different story, right? So we all have privileges and biases that we need to really be reflective about. Unpack cultural and systemic racism. You know, my story of Jumptown and what I shared a little bit about Portland does not first share the story of Indigenous and Native people. And I am wanting to be more committed in my own practice of being able to acknowledge what traumas and what heresies have happened to Indigenous folks, Indigenous people, and this idea of erasure, right? That we, if it's not around us, if it doesn't exist anymore, well, the people are still here. There are still remnants of who Indigenous Native people are, of who Black folks are. We are still here. And so let's step outside this erasure mentality. Let's step outside this invisibility and do some research. Let's honor and respect and listen into the tribes and the elders and what they are asking of us, what they are needing. Let's invite them not just to the table, but to help build a new table. We need to repair and restore and reconcile some deep damage and some dark history. And we don't have to go far to look for it. And that's our work, right? That's our work to make wrongs right. So within our communities, within our workspaces, within our families, we need to honor whose land this was, who has been removed, who's being erased. And I love this quote from Frederick Douglass. He said, "I am one of those who think the best friend of a nation is he who most faithfully rebukes her for her sins, and he her worst enemy, who under the spacious and popular garb of patriotism seeks to excuse, palliate, and defend them." That's a tough quote, but I think it calls us in. Someone talked about obligation and accountability. There is opportunity to make wrongs right. Maybe not at the level and maybe not where our generation will see the fruits of that, but for my grandbaby, your grandbabies, your future children, there's time. As long as human beings are still walking this earth, there's still time. And I think I talked a little bit more about that, repair, resource, and recommit, this idea that so much has been broken. And it's our work to put things back together better. This idea of making room for others. You know, we have been also sold this scarcity mentality that if I create space for someone else, that means I'm gonna lose out on my place or my privilege or my position. And what if you actually were better for it? What if you actually were able to grow and expand? What if we fought hard to make sure there was enough for everyone, right? And I know right now, I know the impacts again of COVID have really impacted my family financially. And it's made me realize that money is not the end all be all to what I feel success needs to be. Success to me is being able to love others as myself. Success to me is sharing and making room for others. And so we are being forced to shift our paradigm, even in how we're having to navigate the world right now. And so how can we share more of where we are? What families that are being impacted by COVID-19 that you know about, that you could lend a hand, you could reach out and share a meal or groceries for a month, or baking bread. I mean, it's just the little things that can go such a long way. Embrace conflict with courage. Okay. So this is where it gets a little nitty gritty, right? When we actually are making room and space for others, and we're gonna rub up with those differences. We're gonna rub up against the ways of being that are challenging for us. I love my white sisters and brothers, I always say, and I have one particular friend who, seriously, she is so good at linear thinking. She's good at, slicing down details. She's good at, procedure and process. Like, it's just how her mind thinks. It's almost like a computer. Like, if you do this, then this, you need to do this. Or if you do this, then this should happen. And there's moments where I need her in my life, right? Because I have this very secular ways of patterns and story and ways of understanding the world and seeing the world. And so it's helpful for me to have her help me shape some of those ways. And then there's times I'm like, oh my gosh, that's so dry, that's so boring. Like, that is, like, I can't do your 10 steps. Like, there's actually 50 steps. And so I challenge her, right, in those ways of loosening up her grip and how she thinks. But we need each other, right? And so again, but we've had to build a lot of skin in the game, to cry tears, having difficult conversations for us to be like, okay, is that your personality? Is that your difference? Is that a bias that you're having right now? So instead of seeing conflict as this horrible thing, it's actually been an invitation for us to get to know each other better and for us to get to know ourselves better. And so we need to have talks about racism. We need to have talks at Thanksgiving and Christmas to that elder or relative who keeps saying the same racist stuff. We need to be prepared to still embrace the person, but challenge the behavior. And when we bring it to a point, again, of this invitation for us to get to know each other better, I think there's power in that. I think we grow from that. So that's one thing is very important when we think about inclusion, and when we are talking and listening to communities, when we have, a low percentage of minorities in our workspace, those that we've hired, you may see their differences as a deficit at times. You may see their differences as getting in the way of business as usual. And there actually probably is a lot of brilliance on the other side of that. There's actually probably a new way of doing something that is innovative or will offer up an opportunity to extend that initiative or that project to not just the dominant community that you're serving, but other marginalized communities, or maybe where that person's coming from. So there is a gift at the end of conflict. I really believe that. But in order to have that gift, we got to commit to staying the course. And so this is where I tell folks, we can fight while holding hands. We can argue while staying in the same room, but we don't get to leave. And I think this is the part of maturity and evolution, again, that we're missing right now in the national conversation about who we want to be in our future. And I think in our own small spaces of influence, there's opportunity to exercise that commitment and to begin to practice a new way of being. So I have one last question and then I'll open it up for questions. But what's one small step? So I've shared a lot here, and you came to this workshop for some reason. There might have been a problem or maybe just an interest in, okay, what is this inclusion thing? Or I need to do better with the community engagement. So I want to give you an invitation. I want to give you an opportunity to make a commitment to one small step you can do that could have great impact for someone else in your community or in your spaces and places of being. And then what's one bold step? Like, what's one thing that would really show a level of, I'm not just gonna be community, I'm gonna be in community with you. So what's one bold step too that you could think about? And this is for you. If you'd like to share, you can, but this is more kind of the takeaway that you can be chewing on later. Francis, I'll also, along with this slideshow, send a list of resources and books. I'm a bookie. You might see a few behind me, but that have really helped me grow deeper and expand my own learning around this conversation, but also ways I've been able to use to have build inclusive culture around this conversation. So book clubbing or bringing it to my team, or just again, I want to make my grandfather proud. I want to make the community that I'm proud of me, that I am continuing to be myself. I'm continuing to center community, identity, and belonging for all. And so, yeah, that's what I have for us today. So thank you so much. And if you want to reach me, it's my email, Solid Ground Consulting. We're a fabulous firm. We do a lot of work on mostly strategic planning. And that really has, our framework is around 4 dimensions of leadership, culture, strategy, and brand. And so if there's other conversations that you'd like to explore with us, let me know. But I will say that we are very much committed to empowering leaders to be who they want to be, both in their work and who they are as a person. So thank you.
There's some nice things coming in through the chat. Judy says, read about a different culture is a small step that she could take. And then a bold step would be to immerse yourself in that community in some way.
Yes.
Ashley says, a small step, keep attending sessions and conversations like this one.
It's powerful. It's where it begins. Yes.
Feel free to keep typing these into the chat box. I did have a question that I'd like to get Veland's take on it. Matt just wanted to know, help me understand the difference between unpacking versus just discussing and understanding things.
That's a good question. I think unpacking is more of a personal dive into how race and racism and bias is showing up in yourself. So unpacking is, okay, let me look at my own self, my own mirror, and see, what parts of this conversation, if I was to be truthful, I'm struggling with, or I don't know and I need to know, right? And then discussing is more, I think, is a safer way. Like it's just more of a broader context of conversation. But I think unpacking is the deeper work of white affinity space, Black and POC affinity space, where we're having these conversations. Ruth King wrote a book called Mindful of Race, is one I suggest. There's also My Grandmother's Hand, which talks again more about our internalized racial identities and how they've been shaped through our country, our family, and then our own ways of navigating that. Because the truth is, everyone is harmed by racism, right? I think there's this belief that racism only impacts people of color, and the truth is, racism is harsh on white folks too. It's denied your humanity. It's pushed you away to be in these privileged places or only places of being. And so there's trauma there too. So that's real. And there are also white folks on the front line too, with Black and POC folks too, that are actually sacrificing themselves to be on this fight too. My grandfather's boss could have gotten a lot of trouble, right? If things would have been told, but he put himself out there for him. He extended himself for him.
You've shared some really great stories, Velan. Frank Quinn, my coworker, says when things get back to normal, whatever that means, it would be great to bring Velan to Ohio.
I'd love to come. I'd love to come.
So, and if anyone has any further questions, please feel free to type those into the chat box. I'm checking the question and answer box here. As a resident of a community, it's terrific for us to understand the benefits of inclusion, but how can we convince a developer to include inclusion into its pro forma? If we cannot convince the developer, are there examples of governmental policies requiring inclusion? Great question,
Yes,
Michael.
that's a really good question. And I will send some case studies, some models here in Portland that have been, I would say, very innovative in choosing developers that hire Black and brown contractors that are committed. PCRI is part of one of the programs I'm thinking of. Reimagine Oregon is another way in which we are going strategically through legislation and all sectors, like trying to hit it on all angles. Because you're right, you can't change people's mindsets, but you can choose who you work with. And if you can't, then how do you learn how to operate around those constraints? Or how do you empower folks that are actually seeing that change happen? I understand very clearly how strategic red tape and all of these ways of constricting inclusion, right, they've been purposely designed, right? And so it's going to take a while to unravel the years of systematic structures. But don't get discouraged. I'd also say keep challenging them. Keep knocking on the door, keep holding up the mirror, keep speaking truth, and call accountability. Call them into accountability while also working with folks that got it figured out.
Elizabeth says, gentrification. You describe gentrification as a bad thing, but it is often also a good thing for the physical fabric of a community. We are participating in a heritage conference, a preservation conference. Do you have ideas about how to more adequately involve, for instance, current residents prior to evictions for the purpose of upgrading housing and upgrading community assets?
That's a lot in that question, and I appreciate that. Gentrification has benefited some, but not all, and that the some, I would say, in my experience in Portland, has been for our most marginalized, our poorest families. But guess what? We were a middle-class family, but we made too much and didn't make enough to be able to buy a home. So while some of those, these new, initiatives are really helping, single parent homes or our single parent families, folks who are trying to, do their best and be their best, what would it have looked like to still have a strong community around them to help them be better invested in, and also sharing of those resources. So that's one thing. I think right now, Black and brown people are pretty tired and pretty weary and kind of suspicious about people's motives. And I think the best way to, cross over the street in these conversations is to ask them what they're needing. And instead of saying what you may need or what's needed, to ask them what they're needing, without any ulterior motive. And I don't mean that in a bad way, because we have grants, we write grants, we have money, there's money that we want to give to communities to help resource. And I think it's so powerful when we allow Black and brown people to speak for themselves and to say what they're needing first, and to do that collectively. So I don't know if I answered that very well, but
hard question.
Yeah, it's a hard question. I would love that person's name so I can give her some things on gentrification that I've been going through as models. There's some states in the country that are doing a good job of this, and have had more success in kind of that integration. So I'd love to expand the conversation, because I don't have all the answers now, but I'm sure there's other models, and I know part of those models had different levels of socioeconomic backgrounds that were able to help hold everyone.
Well, I have shared your email, Velan, in the chat box. So I believe it was Elizabeth. If let me pull. Yeah, Elizabeth Murphy. If you want to, oh, I'm missing the V. Hold on. It's Elin. Velan at solidgroundconsulting.com. So Elizabeth, send Velan a little message, and maybe you all can continue that conversation a little bit and get some materials from her. There's a question in here from Doug Fuller that's actually directed at Heritage Ohio. Thanks, Doug. Appreciate that. Are there efforts by Heritage Ohio and Main Street communities to have a community discussion about inclusion in our community, and how to change the systemic barriers to being an inclusive community? And Doug, to that my answer to that is that's why Velan is here. We have, we've struggled in all of our communities to be inclusive. And just like Velan was saying, ask people, Black and brown people, what is it, what can we do? How can we include you? Rather than doing this elitist thing where we create a place for people. We need to fill this portion on our profile grid on our board. So does anyone know anyone of color who would come and join us? And really every time I see boards do that, then I think to the fundamental way that we build our board, which is we should be forming relationships, working and playing together first, being involved in, a street cleanup, or something that endears us to each other, brings us into each other's worlds, and sharing meals together and being friends together first. And then we bring folks in and train them up to be leaders and all of those things. But too often when we have a hole in that profile grid, then we just go out and try to find the person who fits that, and then we say, oh, we've scooted over and created this place for you at our table, but then we're terrible at the inclusion beyond that point. And that's why people who are not like us don't stay around our board tables. They just simply don't. So, so Doug, that's why Velan's here, and why this is a much longer conversation. And I really appreciate that Velan did not say, okay, here's step 1 and here's step 2.
No.
So Velan, I'd be happy to have you chime in on that too.
Yeah, it's not that easy, but yet I so appreciate the question. For first of all, And back in my parents' day, I wouldn't even be having this conversation, right? There wasn't even an acknowledgement that there is something missing at the table. So I want to say that acknowledgement is huge. So a lot of folks don't even have that. And like Francis was saying, I think it also is, we need to roll up our sleeves and take the time to build community, because relationship, because that is the social I'm trying to say capital. There's money, which has capital, right? There's also this relational capital that you don't just get to show up and think about my community. 4 generations of gentrification, 4 generations. And I get approached oftentimes, can we have a conversation? I want to know how, can you come speak at this? Can you do this? Can you do that? And I'm like, yes, and what are you going to do for my community first? Right? Because for me to step off to come be what you need from me, I still got to go back and tend to my hometown and what's happening there, right? And I'm still, what's your motive? Like what is it about me being in this space that will make it different? Can you educate and elevate that board in a way that holds you all accountable first? And you begin, like Francis, to be able to set the stage to have community groups and partnerships as advisors and seen as equal. It's not also all about your largest donation that you can bring, but it's also your relational capital and who you are as a person, and your way of being just who you are is a resource and powerful. Like we have to really think, and I think Mark Smiley talks a little bit about this too. We're really unpacking, like, what are board, like how can we reshape how we do board work? How do we reshape how we construct boards, right? So I think I'm loving the question, and I do trainings around this. Like there are ways of doing this that are much more technical. This was a much more adaptive and fluid conversation because I wanted to connect with you all. But there are real steps in which we can begin to implement and institute it. But it's not going to happen overnight, and it's going to take some time and some sweat.
Absolutely. Well, and we have another attendee that, in that same vein, how would you recommend reaching marginalized communities to be more involved in Main Street activities and planning? Would this be more of a door-to-door canvassing, face-to-face meetings with churches, mosques, temples, schools? These things may take more time, but it seems real conversations are what makes the most difference. What are the best ways to have truly inclusive community engagement?
I think you just answered your own question. And I think, yes, it is going to take longer. I think there is a level of connection and accountability that people of color are wanting from white folks or predominantly white spaces, dominant spaces. And I think there's opportunity. Like, what would it look like for Main Street to really be this place of diversity and inclusion and vibrancy, where Black and brown people could come and share their resource, their business, their feel seen and heard? I mean, I want to come to that party. Who wouldn't want to come to that? But like you're saying, there's probably some history there that hasn't been tended to. There might have been some harms or some wrongs done that need to be spoken of and corrected and held into accountability, some restorative justice there. There may be some needs and requests of the community before we do this. I need to see if I can trust you. And you're saying this, but are you going to be here a year from now? Are you going to be here 10 years from now? Are you,
after this meeting?
Or after this meeting, right. And
did you invite me for a drink after the meeting?
Yes. So I think I know Black and brown people, they're my people. And there's something when we can see your authenticity and your genuineness even if you're saying all the wrong things, like, you know, even if you're like stumbling, it's like, but you keep trying. I mean, you just keep trying, you keep showing up. That's what I'm talking about. And that's what it's going to take. And it's going to take this leveraging of power and resource.
Yep.
It's going to take a whole paradigm shift.
Well, and in the meantime, we're probably all going to say a lot of embarrassing and inappropriate things that we have to learn. Those things are embarrassing.
Part of it. So don't trip on it. Just keep going, right?
Yeah.
Just keep going. We don't scorn a child for not knowing how to walk when they just learned how to crawl, right? We just like, come on, keep trying, right? And we encourage them not to soak over the last little spill, but keep moving. And I think, you know, me as a 47-year-old Black woman, I've been talking and knowing about race my whole life. I know how to navigate whiteness because I've had to survive. For my white brothers and sisters, for white folks, you all haven't had these conversations about it. You're like brand new babies in all of this. Now I still have a level of expectation. Don't get it wrong. Y'all some smart
appreciate
people.
The grace.
Y'all some smart people. I believe in your humanity. I'm not gonna shortchange, you know, that level of I think we give white folks permission not to engage because, oh, I don't know. No, come on, step up to it. You can do it too. So we're not going to have that, but you know, there is this learning that is going to have to come at your cost, at your time, at your investment. And you can Google anything. I just say Google it. Just Google it.
So Matt has another question. How do you suggest we create more open, inclusive, and diverse commercial districts to encourage more residents of our town to engage with others and to be part of the community? What can we do? What do we need? What do we put in place? And to that same question, I'll add a little tag. Just in my personal experience, I'm learning that I was the executive director in Delaware for 10 years, and that the South End neighborhood, the Black neighborhood, felt very excluded from the planning process, during the whole time of our creation of the Main Street program. But then also, as you were saying, restorative justice needs to happen, because for the longest time in Delaware, Black people were not allowed to cross William Street. So our primary downtown district was inaccessible to those people throughout history. So, you know, and those are the things that I never really thought about. So in this same vein of becoming more inclusive in our commercial districts, I think part of it could be that we need to have a greater understanding of what that commercial district stood for.
Right, that's right. You can speak, Frances, you can speak so much more explicitly to your, you know, where you all are. And just to add to that, again, part of it is do the work, investigate what Black and Brown businesses are thriving, are struggling, have been historically around the community, have been a legacy in the community. There's ways of doing community surveys, community focus groups. You could hire an outside firm like us to go do that work, someone that looks like the people, that can say, I don't know what, I can't overpromise, I can't promise what can happen, but I can promise to share your perspective. I will tell the truth about what your experience has been. I will demand for your needs to be heard. So I think there is this leveraging of, if you want Black and Brown people to come, they need to know, they want to know, can they stay, right? If you want to have them involved, they want you to speak to the harms and the history of what has happened. Why should they come? What would make it appealing to them, right? Ask them. Ask them what that would look like. What part of the skin in the game, what do they get out of this, right? Like, at the end of the day, we all want to be valued and seen and resourced for who we are and what we offer. So there's just work to do, but it can be done. we all need each other. Like the truth, especially now, y'all, we really do all need each other. And I don't think that, again, as long as we're human beings trying to live out this experience, we're gonna always have the opportunity to have this space, to have this happen.
Thanks, Phelan.
Yeah.
If anyone has any further questions, I'd be happy to answer those. Just checking all of my little boxes, making sure I got everyone. Thanks so much, Phelan, for being with us. I feel like this is an ongoing conversation, and something that maybe we can tap into you a couple more times going forward. Like I said before, Phelan's email address is in the chat box, the second one, not the first one. Feel free to.
You kept trying, Francis. You kept trying.
I know. I'm working on it. I'm working on it. This session was recorded and will be sent to attendees later this evening in an email. For those of you who were here during the live session, thanks so much for being here. Next up this afternoon at 2 o'clock is Jack of All Preservation Trades with Jim Turner and Nicholas Redding. So if you're not registered yet, there's still time. You can do that. Go to the Heritage Ohio website, register for the rest of the conference. We've still got a whole nother week next week. So today, tomorrow, and then next week as well. So feel free to go ahead and register for those sessions. And thanks again for being here. And Phelan, thank you so much for sharing with us. I really appreciate all your personal stories.
Thank you. Thank you. All right, y'all.
All right. Have a great day, everyone. Thank you. Bye.